Look, while I am introducing 180, go ahead and drop in the chat where you're tuning in from and what you are munching on. And so I want to welcome you a little bit about 180 Contracts. 180 Contracts is a contract template company for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and freelancers. We provide attorney drafted contracts that are the next best thing to hiring an attorney without breaking the bank. And one of the ways that we support our community here at 180 Contracts is with our lunch and learns. Look, it is one thing to have a contract, it is a completely other thing to know how to properly use it, as well as to know how to, give me 1 second. One thing to know how to actually know the laws around contracts, and particularly today's lunch and learn is about AI clauses you can't afford to miss. Now, before I jump into our lunch and learn again, welcome. Drop where you're tuning in from in the chat and what you're munching on, because our lunch and learns are informal. It is informal where you can lay back, be relaxed and learn as you munch during this lunchtime. So a little bit about myself, who you're listening to. I am Chayla Jackson. I am the CEO and founder of 180 Contracts, and I am a practicing trademark and business attorney. 180 Contracts came about because I had clients who were coming to me with janky contracts, contracts they got from online or they borrowed from someone, and it did not protect them. But I also had entrepreneurs, small business owners, and amazing women who I would encounter, who I would teach, coach. And I realized that they did not have access to contracts, or they were as apprehensive about hiring an attorney to actually draft a contract for them. So let's be honest, right? Sometimes the money is not there. But I did not want that to be a barrier to business owners getting the contracts they need, because in business, contracts are not optional, they are required to protect you. And so today in our lunch and learn here, we're going to start talking, we're going to delve into AI. Okay, AI clauses you cannot afford to miss. Now look, whether you are pro AI or anti AI, the truth of the matter is AI is here, right? Like, it's here. We see it in our faces. AI is. It is here. Okay. Now look, I see South Carolina in the house, y'all. Okay. I got family from South Carolina. I grew up my summers in South Carolina. So South Carolina has a special place in my heart. Welcome, South Carolina. I just want to honor you guys for being here. So look, when we talk about AI, it's AI is here. I don't see it going anywhere. It's been here for a while, and the reality is that AI is causing some disturbance in the legal field. It just is, and so look, lawyers are getting sanctioned. Okay, they not even a pat on the hand, they are getting sanctioned for using AI because AI is hallucinating cases that don't exist. Celebrities are trying to find ways to protect their themselves from AI clones and people using their image and their voice, right? And now business owners are finding out that, hey, AI is not foolproof, and it comes with hard lessons. And so in this lunch and learn, I want to make sure that we are talking about what clauses that we need to make sure you don't have to learn the hard lessons. And so for those of you coming in, welcome to our lunch and learn with 180. Go ahead and drop it in the chat where you're tuning in from and what you're munching on. Okay, what did y'all bring to munch on today? What you munching on? All right. Now, here's the reality is, right, is whether or not you're using AI, your clients, other people can be using AI, people you hire can be using AI, and the law is still catching up with AI. The law is still catching up with AI. And so because the law is still trying to keep pace, the reality is so are business owners. And so here's how this lunch and learn came to be about. I was on Threads a couple of weeks ago, and this woman posted that a company signed up for her free Zoom webinar, came into her webinar, recorded her entire presentation, put it online, and then had the nerve. She wore a new outfit for her webinar. Had the nerve to take a screenshot of her, created a AI professional headshot, and then sent her an email saying you can download your free AI professional headshot. Now, I don't know about you. Y'all, you let me know in the chat because this is interactive. What do you be looking at little sign? Like, hold on. Did you just record my entire presentation? Right? It's crazy, ain't it? You just recorded my entire presentation, put it online, and you took a screenshot of me and trying to give me a headshot. I did not ask you for that. And it made me realize that she didn't know what to do. She was asking Threads, now what do I do about this? And I realized most of us are not prepared for how people are using AI. I mean, it caused me to go and start making some changes to my own contracts. Like, we not gonna do this. And so, look, the law is still catching up. And then there was not just that woman, but other business owners were talking about how their clients were using AI to give feedback. And then the AI was flagging feedback that did not exist, errors that were not there. So it was causing them to do more work than what was necessary. And so here we are, y'all, because I saw business owners saying, I'm adding AI clauses and I'm adding this to my contract. And I was like, you know what? Let's talk about AI clauses you can't afford to miss in 180 contracts because you can have a clause and have it completely wrong. Okay. So I just want to be clear because this is one of the contracts. So we're focusing on AI in contracts. We're in the contract zone. All right. Now, this is a lunch and learn. I don't see what y'all are chewing on. Y'all did not tell me what food that y'all brought. This is a lunch and learn. I want to know what y'all snacking on. Okay. I want to hear you talk back to me in the chat. This is interactive. This is so we can talk at towards the end. We're going to have Q&A so you can ask any questions that you have, but this is a relaxed way for you to learn about contracts. So let's get started because we're talking about AI clauses you can't afford to list. And I'm still looking for what y'all munching on. Okay. Last time we had this, I had some really, really good ideas of what I wanted to snack on after we had the lunch and learn from what people were snacking on in here. So I'm looking for ideas. Ideas, and I hope it's yummy. All right, so let's talk AI clauses you can't afford to miss. One clause you can absolutely not afford to miss in your contracts is an AI disclosure clause. Now, whether you're using AI or not, you still want to have it in here, and here's why. Because you may be using AI tools, or the software you're using is using AI tools like Zoom, and they're doing note taking. They're taking notes. But the other reason is that because AI is new and we're seeing the issues with it, we're seeing how AI can be used harmfully, that there are states that are coming up with laws that are going to impact you as a business owner. And so because one of the laws in different every state is going to have a different law, you're probably working with people who are in different states. You want to make sure that you're covered. So whether you're using AI or not, a AI disclosure clause will essentially help you essentially say, look, we may be using AI tools and give you the right to use them. But it's not just enough for you to disclose it, which essentially is giving notice or awareness to everyone involved that you're using AI tools. But here's the other thing that you may not have considered, right? So maybe you're using AI. You can let me know how you're using AI in your business. Maybe you're using AI to take notes, right? You're meeting with clients, it's taking notes for you, summarizing the meeting. I was on a call with a client of mine because I'm a practicing trademark and business attorney. So I have my own law firm outside of 180 contracts. And so I was on a call with a client and I was counseling my client. And I kid you not, in the middle of speaking, I heard a beep beep noise, and I said, "Are you recording me? Are you recording?" And my client said, "Oh, yes, yes, I'm sorry." And because I knew my client's character, I knew it wasn't malicious. But I said, "Are you recording your clients as your clients, the people you speak to as well?" And she was like, "Yeah, it automatically starts recording whenever she gets on a call." That's AI. It's recording. Now, here's what you may not have realized, that anytime we're talking about contracts, we are always talking about other areas of law. And when you start using AI, particularly to record people, every state has recording laws. And some states require two-party consent in order for you to record them, whereas other states require only one-party consent. Have you ever, I don't know how long you've ever been using Zoom, but back in the day, Zoom didn't used to do this, but then it started as like giving a notice that, hey, you are being recorded. Y'all remember that? You are being recorded. Oh, I see. Look, I'm looking. Oh, I see some fruit and dip. Some munch. What chips you munching on, Lauren? What chips you got? You got some barbecue chip with some sour and cream. What chips you munching on? Okay, fruit and Toki. Is that your boarded up fruit and dip? Come on now. Go ahead and shout your business out in the chat. Look, go ahead. You never know who's in the room. Look, of course, go ahead and use your own stuff. It's probably good. It looks delicious. If I was in South Carolina, I probably, can I get a boarded up too? Look, so let me get back to it, right? So Zoom, right? They started putting that notice, you are being recorded. And what did you notice? They have a little box there, right? That requires you to click OK. You want to know why that box is there? One, because contracts, when you are on the internet, contracts require consent. It requires that both parties have a meeting of the minds. But how do you do that? How do you prove that somebody consented to your recording? You have to have an affirmative action, the clicking of the button. So because recording laws are different in every state, one notice pop up and they click the button, boom, they've consented to being recorded. This is why an AI disclosure clause in your contracts is one clause you can't afford to miss. One, the law is still catching up. Two, we have recording laws, and we don't know what software that you're going to be using. So as you're switching out software, you don't know if that software is actually recording you. Sometimes they send you notes of the meeting and you're like, I didn't even know you were listening in. And so having that disclosure in your contract is so important to cover you legally, but also to just give you a wide berth. Whether you use it or not, you have it protected. And it's clear what actually may be covered in AI. Now, here's the thing, most people think that contracts are the traditional contracts, right? The paper contracts, you get it signed, it's official. Is that you? Is that you? Let me know. Come on, this is a lunch and learn. Be honest. Is that you thinking that the only type of contract is the traditional contract that you get signed? You send it over to the client, they sign it. Come on, and put your business out there, right? Right. And then, so Jerry, let me stop right here. Jerry did something. She mentioned something that is very important. And it was actually one of the things I told my client to do, as I advised her, right? Because it's one thing to have it in your contract, it's another thing to cover your behind or get it on the record, which I say before you start recording anyone, just let them know, hey, I record for this purpose. Do you consent? And then when they say yes, then like, I'm going to start the recording and I'm going to ask you again to have it on the recording. So now you have it both ways and you have it on the record, right? So thanks, Jerry, for bringing that up. So most people think, right, that, the contract is the traditional contract. But here's the thing that you may be missing out on when we talk about AI clauses you can't afford to miss, especially the disclosure clause, is when people schedule an appointment with you, your appointment calendar typically sometimes allows for you to put clauses in there. That is a part of contracts as well. Your terms and conditions, if you have a checkout cart, they have to click a button, say they have read and agreed to the terms and conditions. That's a contract. So you can put your clauses where, like, I call it a gatekeeper, the gatekeeper before they meet with you, so that now you have proof that they have agreed for your use of AI. All right. And that's to cover you. Again, whether you use it or not, it's to cover you. And so, boop, doop, doop, doop. So I covered that one. I'm just looking at my notes here, making sure I covered everything. I did. Perfect. All right. So the last thing, because I don't want you to get caught up in, oh, well, you didn't tell me you were using AI, you were recording me. It's illegal to record me. Look, sometimes, and let's just be honest, in the economy that we have in, there are people who, they start out friendly, they want your services, they want to work with you. Something goes wrong, they get an attitude, and then they start looking for any kind of way that they can get at you. We don't want that. So your AI disclosure is one way that you can notify them that AI may be used, but also to let them know, hey, if you continue, you consent to the use. So that's an AI disclosure. Now, a second clause, a second AI clause you cannot afford to miss is an AI disclosure again, but this time for them, an AI disclosure for them. Now, who is them? Y'all ever heard of them? Who is them? Well, them are the people you're working with. Look, if you are hiring a contractor, maybe you're at the stage of hiring an employee, you want them to disclose if they are using AI. If you are working with a client, you want them to disclose that they are using AI, especially if you're asking for feedback. And here's why. Remember, I said the law is still catching up with AI. Now, here's what we know about AI. AI can lie. AI can hallucinate. AI can find issues that really are not there. It can give not just false information, but half truths. And if you're not careful, embedded in AI can also be infringement materials and things that are owned by someone else. So we don't know when someone is giving us something that was created or generated by AI if it is actually good for us to use. So the potential harm to you, your business, especially if it's AI generated images, graphics, and videos, or any books, written materials, that can be detrimental. And here's why. Anytime we're dealing with creative expressive works, like, again, graphics, images, videos, slides, books, podcasts, that has been generated, really purely generated by AI, US copyright law says this: it's not protected. Yeah. It's not protected. And if it's not protected under copyright law, then that means you cannot stop other people from using it. So if you are creating, let's say, images of things in your slides with AI, and somebody steals it, it's technically not stealing because it was never protected in the first place. This is why your contract is so important. And the different types of contracts you have, like terms and conditions or a contract, become so important when you're using AI as a tool to help you create in business. And so the disclosure is important because if you don't know that they used AI, then you don't know if you can actually own it. You don't know if you can actually protect it. So knowing if a contractor who's creating work for you is using AI is so important. If a client is using AI, is so important. And so is if your employee or if anybody else working with you is using AI, they need to disclose that to you so that you can identify whether or not this can be trusted, whether or not you can use it, or whether or not copyright protection applies so that you can stop others from using it and protect the intellectual property and assets being created for your business. So this is why an AI disclosure clause for them is important as well. So you can even decide if you want to opt out of their ability to use AI from the beginning, meaning you could put a ban, you cannot use AI, or which is called an AI prohibition clause, or what I like to do is put an exception. So if you don't want the other party using AI, you can I like to write in grace to our 180 contracts that you can put an exception. You can only use it with our permission. Now, here's the thing that you have to be mindful of if you were going to do a complete ban is this. There are people, especially with disabilities, that use assisted technology. And some of that assisted technology may be AI. So people who are deaf, people who are blind, they need assistance to actually be able to access content under the American Disabilities Act. And you don't want a legal case because you have banned materials that somebody with a disability actually needs to use. This is why when we talk about contracts and people are putting contract clauses in their contracts themselves, is we are never talking just about contract law. We are always dealing with other areas of law. Y'all following me? You keeping up? Come on. Yes, and Lauren, you're absolutely right, right? By not just reading the right, they by joining the program, they agree. Absolutely right. Sometimes it's not that they sign, but at least having they click a button or something that they agree to, especially if you're using a checkout cart to collect payment for your program. That is how contracts on the internet can be formed as well when it's not their traditional signature. That's what I love about contracts. They find a way. So, again, thinking about grace in your contracts, because this is one thing you do not want to miss. Because if you hire someone to create something for you and they're using AI, you don't know if they don't tell you whether AI was created. And if you go to try to register that with the US Copyright Office, they're going to ask you. They're going to ask you, is there any AI materials in this? Or they're going to ask you, to disclose. You have the penalty of law, and you don't want to get in trouble because you gave false information. The other thing as well is that if someone steals it and you try to protect it, technically you don't have the rights because copyright law is not protecting purely AI generated contract. That's why, look, for many of us, we're like, well, what do we put in our contracts? Well, that's why I put together over 20 AI clauses that you can drop into your contracts and defend yourself so that you have the language that you need. Because look, you already got a contract. You just have to beef up those protections. So for those of you who are here, you can learn more about that and grab that at 180contracts.com. And again, it's built in for you to copy and paste and make some changes, because the reality is what we're talking about now is things that happen afterwards, right? But once it happens, it happens. And so a good defense is actually a strategic and good offense, because when we're talking about legal issues and people stealing stuff, it's not when it happens that we need a good defense. It's now in the contract that we have to make sure we have the protections in to actually protect us. So, AI clauses you can't afford to miss. The next one is an AI ownership clause. Okay. An AI ownership clause. Now, I just said that creative expressive works purely generated by AI is what? Not protected under copyright law. That means it's not a copyright. So, if it's not a copyright, that means it doesn't fall under intellectual property. It means that it's another type of asset. And this is why, if your contract only covers intellectual property, you're probably missing out on protections for your other type of property that you have in your business, your assets. And so, this is why you want to make sure that you own, even if it's created by AI, you want to own it, and you own it and have the right to use it. And you do that in your contract. And so your contract shouldn't just cover intellectual property and those things created AI, right? Intellectual property, but other assets as well. This is why, if you're using AI systems, they know that if you're creating something, it's not intellectual property, but in the contract called the terms and service that you agree to when you actually register for these online accounts, they'll actually say that you are the owner of the work. Because when you can't get it under law, you get it through a contract. That's how you get ownership over work that is created by other people. Now, let me just stop right here. Let me just stop right here. Okay. Let me just stop right here. Because one of the things you have to understand when we talk about intellectual property and we talk about assets in contracts, particularly copyrights, okay? Copyright law does this. Whoever created it is usually the owner of it. Whoever created it is the owner, not the one who paid for it, the one who created it. And so if your contract is silent on transferring ownership, chances are you don't own it even though you paid for it. And this is why I have said if you want to own it, you got to put a contract on it. I just want to drop that there for those of you who maybe you've been doing business for a while, but you never knew that when folks are doing videos for you, your brand photos, logo designs, that if your contract is silent, they still own the rights for it. Yeah, they still own the rights, but you can go back and you can get it transferred with a intellectual property assignment agreement. Okay, you can get those, you can get it. So I just want to stop right there, just in case you did not know that. So back to AI. So if it doesn't fall under IP, then it's another type of asset. But you can get those, you can own those assets, whether it is not just created by someone else, but here's the other thing too. Copyright law, it provides if there's human meaning someone human has added enough creativity in it, copyright law will actually apply some protection to the human elements. But what happens if your client, somebody else, takes your stuff that wasn't protected and creates something else? That could be considered a derivative work. So we don't just want to own our stuff and other assets. We want to own what somebody creates off of our stuff as well. This is why AI ownership clauses are important, because most entrepreneurs, most business owners, most creatives are thinking about the immediate. I want to own my stuff. But they're not thinking about what happens if someone takes your stuff and creates something based off of it using AI. You want to own that too, right? We want all ownership, and we want the right language to make sure that that ownership is transferred to us. So, AI, not just intellectual property, but an AI intellectual property and other assets clause is a clause you do not want to miss. You want to own it just in case if the law classifies it as IP or not, or if it's another asset, you want to own it, and you want to own anything they try to create off of it. So they don't try to say, well, I have the right in this. No, you don't. It belongs to me or my business. Okay. Y'all following me? You following? Are you following me? AI clauses you can't afford to miss, because people are doing crazy things with AI. And as they keep doing crazy things, we want to make sure that we're protected. We want to make sure we have the right clauses in place now before anything happens, right? Or as they say, I don't know why I'm thinking about Set It Off. Y'all remember the movie Set It Off? Look, just a little quick detour. I was on YouTube and I found some video that was like a modern day version, but a little bit different to Set It Off. And they were robbing banks, and they were getting away with it too. And I was like, ain't nobody die in this one. But we want to make sure we have the right contracts in place so that, look, we don't have to set it off when someone tries to steal our stuff, because it's built into our contracts. And we can say, look, if I don't have a right to recover under the law, then I have a right to recover under contract, breach of contract, which brings me to the next AI clause you can't afford to miss, which is a AI restrictions on use clause. Some of the assets that you have in business may not fall under intellectual property law. That includes proprietary information. Some of you have frameworks. Maybe you're a coach, right? You consult. You have frameworks. You have a proprietary way in which you do things. You walk a client through a process. And for some of you, your knowledge, you develop it into resources and into deliverables for your clients. Well, here's the thing. When it leaves your hands, you don't really have any oversight or control about what the other party does with that. but you can if you have a AI restrictions clause, a restrictions on use. Because for some AI systems, you don't know if they're using information put into that system to train their own AI. We don't want our proprietary information falling into an AI training system. So you can put restrictions on use. You can't use it to train, or you can't even input it into another system, because some type of assets, the moment it is disclosed, you lose legal protection for it under the law. So we want to restrict their use of it. Now, here's the other thing, because there are other types of restrictions that you may have that is not just limited to AI, but it could be limited to them storing it on public repositories or a public forum. You don't want your stuff ending up on the internet. There are restrictions you can put in place. That way, once it leaves your hands, you still have some governance over that use. Now, here's one of the things that you want to maybe consider adding into that clause, and that is making a breach of that clause a material breach. There are two types of breaches, okay, in contract law. One is a minor breach, meaning it's minor, it's not enough to actually cause a disturbance of the contract. But when it is a material breach, that means this is a really big problem. And so when you make a violation of your restrictions clause a material breach, you're also saying, look, because you have materially breached the contract, we have a right to terminate the contract and pursue you under contract law, because your proprietary information is nothing to play with. Okay. That's your money maker typically. And so you don't want them taking your stuff and using it to train AI systems or to use it in any other manner that you have placed a restriction on. And that brings us to my last AI clause. Certainly not the last AI clause, right, that you can add into your contract, but the last AI clause for this lunch and learn that one, you absolutely 100%, okay, do not want to miss. Y'all, is this good? Is this eye-opening? Are you learning? Is this good to you? Let me know in the chat. Is this good? It have you learned something that you said, you know what, right? It has you looking at your own contract with a side eye, like, I need to add this to my contract. I did not consider that. Let me know in the chat. Talk back to me. Look, very much like someone said, I need those clauses. Look, I'm gonna give it to you how you can get it in just a moment. So look, been testing AI for a good moment now, testing it for, how does it work with editing contracts, giving revisions, all of that. And so I was drafting a clause on limiting liability. I was drafting a clause for liability in a contract, and I decided to input this clause into an AI system and say, give me feedback. Here's what the AI system told me. It told me that my clause was wrong, and it gave me revised language for the clause. I don't look, you don't have to tell me. I don't know how many of you have been using AI. I use AI, okay, for many different reasons. But how many of you have been using AI for your contracts? Uh-huh. See, I was testing AI because I wanted to have a training for our 180 contracts community on how to take our templates and use AI to get state specific revisions and tighten up restrictions, because our templates that are more general, right, general contract principles to protect them, but to use AI to tighten up some things. So I was using AI to see, okay, what works, what doesn't work, because you got to train the system. Depending on the system, you got to train it so it doesn't lie to you, it gives you the right feedback, all of that. But when it gave me back revised language, okay, my original language said that the client would not be responsible for any liability for information, particularly not just information, but if there was a stop work order. So I don't know how many of you do government contracts, but the government sometimes will issue a stop work order, like you have to stop work. And so I had drafted a clause that said, look, if anything goes wrong during a stop work order, unless the client was grossly negligent or willfully did some misconduct, meaning they had to really do something horrible, my client would not be liable. Okay. So during a stop work order, they would not be liable on something horribly went wrong. The AI system gave me revised language that said that my clients, if they breached the contract, would be liable. And I sat here and I said, you just expanded the scope of liability. I had narrowed it to they had to do something really, really wrong. And you just said if they breach any part of the contract, they'll be liable. That means that even if it was something small, even if it didn't happen during a stop work order, that the government could say, oh, no, you're liable because of the revised language the AI system gave me. And when I called it out, it said, you know what? You're right. You limit it to a negligent standard, and they limit it to just breach of contract, which could be anything. Be mindful if you're using AI for your contract drafting, okay? Because it doesn't always know the law. So the reason I share that story is because what happens if a client or anyone, a contractor, gives you something created by AI and it's owned by somebody else? What happened? Like, who's responsible for that? So I had used AI on 2 occasions, and on both occasions, AI gave me brand names that were already taken by somebody else. Already taken. Which means if I had not done my due diligence and I had used those names, I could have been in trouble. And not just trouble, because they're not going to sue an AI system. They coming after what? You, right? Because people want that in this economy, people want what? They want their moolah, their money. So, our last AI clause that you cannot afford to miss, absolutely cannot afford to miss, is a AI limitation of liability and indemnification clause. A limitation of liability and indemnification clause. Okay. Now I'm putting these two together, but stay with me. And because y'all have stayed to this point, I'm gonna give you something that I just know you're gonna love. I know you're gonna love this. Okay. I just know you're gonna love this because what I'm telling you is not just for AI, it's also for your contracts as well. So when we limit liability, first and foremost, we never want to limit our ability to recover. We always want to limit their ability to recover from us. And so when we're limiting liability, there is something called statute of limitations. So we want to limit how long the other party can come after us to bring a suit. But we also want to limit what they can recover for. But when it is our turn, we do not want a limitation on liability. So when clients are using AI, when contractors, even your employees, okay, using AI, you want to have some protection in there. And most people are familiar with indemnification. Have you heard that term before? Let me know. Have you heard indemnify, indemnification? Have you heard that? Just let me know in the chat. Because most people have heard the term, but they don't necessarily understand the term. They think if they see indemnification that it might protect them, that oh, this is good. Let me know. Have you seen that? Is it in your contract? Like, do you have a contract and you see indemnification? Here's what indemnification is, okay? When you see indemnification, pay attention. Indemnification means that somebody has to step in to pay the price. If there is a legal issue, somebody has to step in to pay the price. But here this is why you're gonna love this, okay? Most people only stop at indemnification. But here's the issue with indemnification. There has to be a fault finding. Something has to be wrong. There has to be a fault finding in order for someone to have to step in and to indemnify you, which means it's at a later step in the process. But how many of you know, either by personal experience or because you watch TV or you know somebody else, that the legal bills start before you ever get into court? The legal bills start before you ever even get to hear a case or resolve a legal matter. You start racking up money just to talk to an attorney. And so, if it's just indemnification steps in later on, which means you're still on the hook for the bills. So if they did something wrong, you're still on the hook for paying the legal bill because we haven't even gotten to the stage when indemnification would kick in yet. That's why there's a little word called defend. There's a little, it's a little word, but it's a big word that they have to defend you when something goes wrong, because defending you steps in early. So that means that the moment a legal issue pops up, they got to step in at that point and start paying the bills. This is why indemnification is not the only language you want. You want them to defend you. So they have to start paying early on. And so when we talk about AI use, and the issue with AI and how AI can get you in trouble, whether you're using somebody's image, whether you're using somebody else's copyright, where AI system generates something that already belongs to someone else. And look, people are using AI and it's generating people. People may say that looks like me. And under the law, people have the right to profit off of their image, which means that if you're using an AI generated image of someone for your business to market, and someone says, hold on, that's my image, they could possibly go after you to recover for you using their image for marketing. Now, whether they win or not is another issue, but we want to have it in our contracts that if somebody, let's say you have a contractor doing work for you, marketing, graphic design, that if they make a mistake, they have to defend and identify you. And we want to make sure that if you are using AI, that there is a limitation of liability of how much somebody can recover for your use of AI. Now, I didn't mention this, but I hope this goes without saying that AI can have what? Hallucinations, errors, half truths, all of that. So, your contract also needs to make sure that you do not have any warranty whatsoever, that AI is free and clear of any defects whatsoever, or that a human was involved in reviewing it to make sure there are no errors. So, AI limitation of liability and identification clause. That's what you want, but you want to make sure you have the right language so that you are legally covered and you're truly protected, because the language you add today makes a huge, huge difference in how you may be able to be protected, whether or what you have to pay, what someone has to pay you, and what you can recover for some other day. And so, look, if you are someone that you don't want to have to guess, you don't want to have to figure it out, you don't want to have to like, what AI clauses do I put in? Look, I am offering to you to grab the AI clauses, drop in and defend. I put together 20 AI clauses that are organized and separated by who to use it for, whether it's for your use of AI, whether it's for your clients' use of AI, whether you are hiring employees or contractors, or whether it's for liability. But that's not it. You probably did not go to law school. And because this is drop and defend, it comes with a guide that tells you when to use it and exactly where to drop it into your existing contract. And with all of 180 contract templates, we always provide walkthrough instructions on how to edit it so that you limit human error and what language you're putting in there. And it always comes with our buy once, receive additional or our updated versions at no additional cost, because again, the law is still catching up. The law is changing. And when it does, we update our contracts and our clauses, and then we provide it to our customers, our community, so that as long as you stay connected, you'll get it without having to invest again. And so you can click the button right here to grab it, or you can go to 180contracts.com and click shop templates, and you'll see it available there as well. So that is the conclusion of our lunch and learn. We're going to open it up to Q&A. So if you have questions, you can drop your questions in the chat right now, and we're going to transition to Q&A. And not only that, transition to Q&A, right, if you have feedback, aha, it's like this was good, you can drop it in the chat now as well. The replay will be available on our YouTube channel at the 180 Contract, so you can still watch it if you want to come back to it and get it. But please, you can drop your questions now in the Q&A, and we're going to transition to Q&A. Thank you, Lauren. Said this is so informative. I'm looking at the chat now to see if we have anything here. Again, shout out to South Carolina. Shout out to Georgia. I mentioned before, I grew up partially in South Carolina. In my summer times, I got family down there. So South Carolina has a special place in my heart. Georgia, my niece is in Georgia, so I got to travel down there sometimes. I only saw two people add what they were munching on, and y'all just left me hanging. What y'all was eating? What you was eating? Okay, we have a question by Lauren. What other types of law do you specialize in? Well, in 180 contracts, this is just contract templates. In my law firm, it is trademarks and business, but I have been teaching entrepreneurs the laws of doing business for over, shoot, how long has it been? Let's just say over 5 years now, where I've actually been teaching them. And so with my first book, Build a Legit Business, I actually I had to delve into other areas of law, which some people will say, oh, that's a generalist, right? Like, oh, you know how people they misuse the quote, right, to be a master of none. I forgot how the quote goes, but you got to look at it a little bit more. But it actually caused me to actually study other laws of doing business, from marketing to sales to business formation to website. And because of that, and because I was teaching on a greater scale and level, so people understood the laws, and not just not just like, oh, here what the law is, but understanding it from a CO perspective. Like, I was a business owner before I was an attorney. And so I know that when you're looking at the laws, like, what the heck is this? Like, I couldn't tell you how long I got stuck on what a C corp is versus an LLC, like what's the difference. And so the way I taught was how everyday people could understand. So I started out doing that way. I started out teaching, and then when it came time to actually specialize, it was trademarks, contracts, and business. So I still do some consulting, but in 180 contracts, there are no legal services, just our contract templates, which is a legal product. And we do our lunch and learns because, as you can tell, right, it's not just enough to have a contract. You actually have to know how to use it. And so in our emails, I provide education around contracts. When folks purchase a contract template, they actually get education on how to properly use it. Most people don't know that if your name is at the top of a contract, you are personally liable, especially if it's a business contract. So you have to know how to use it so that your contract actually protects you. How to get it signed and how to edit it, but also other things like this, right? AI clauses, because the law is still growing, still evolving, and laws change. So it looks like that is all. So I want to thank you all so much. I'll stay around for just a little bit longer for anyone who may have questions. But I want to thank you for attending the 180 Contracts Lunch and Learn. This was AI clauses you cannot afford to miss. And the replay will be available on our YouTube channel at the 180 Contracts, and previous lunch and learns are available there as well. So I want to thank you. And if you are not on our email list and you want to be on there, we send out a monthly newsletter. We also have a blog on our website called Let's Talk Contracts. You can sign up for the next lunch and learn, get on our newsletter, and check out our blog at 180contracts.com. And you can definitely grab the AI clauses, drop in and defend when you click shop templates. All right. Thank you so much for attending, and I'll stay around for just a little bit longer for those of you who just want to chat and have more questions.